I remember saying, what do you mean? And he said, well, I had to teach myself English because I wanted to compete. I wanted to learn about brewing. I
Oh,
wanted to learn about espresso. I wanted to learn about roasting. And he looked me in the eye and he said, Emma, if you want to grow the coffee, the books are in Spanish. If you want to enjoy the coffee, the books are in English. And I swear to you, I just went, whoa.
hey friends, it's Lee Safar here with some exciting news. The introduction to regenerative coffee farming workshops are now available on demand in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. These workshops are designed to give you actionable insights into the future of coffee farming through regenerative agriculture. Whether you're a coffee producer, roaster, cafe owner, or just passionate about coffee sustainability. For coffee producers, the workshop is available for just $10, and for everyone else, it's $20, a small price to pay for knowledge that could transform your understanding of what it's going to take to grow coffee from now on. Led by our incredible professors Angela Barrero, Murilo Bettarello, Felipe Croce, Carlos Ordóñez, and João Araújo, the workshop is packed with practical knowledge and strategies to help coffee farmers and the entire coffee industry adapt to the challenges of climate change, rising costs, and market demands. If you're a business owner, this workshop is a great and affordable way to inform your employees about the challenges ahead while also supporting Mapper Forward. This is also a great workshop to share with or gift to your coffee producers. Head to mapperforward.coffee/workshops or click the link in the description to purchase the on-demand version and start your journey towards a more sustainable coffee future today. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 1 of a brand new 5-part series with Emma Haines from Algrano. Emma, welcome to the podcast for the first time.
Hi, Lee. Thank you for having me.
It is my absolute pleasure. We were fated to meet in a... Do you remember this? So we were both in India and we were in this beautiful hotel. And we were there for World Coffee Conference, and I think I was sitting there eating breakfast, and this fantastic English woman came up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Emma," and you said hi, and I'm like, "Hi," and we had this really lovely conversation, and you very sheepishly walked away and said, "Sorry, I don't want to disturb your breakfast," and it was really fantastic. Well, it was a great trip. I felt very fortunate for meeting you. And then here we are, a couple of years later, and I've kept track of you on social media. And then I reached out to you a few weeks ago and said, please come on the podcast. I want to talk to you about what the fuck is going on with coffee. And, because by that point I had figured out enough about you to know that you are really invested in the success of stakeholders in the supply chain. You're not pretending. Even though you're in sales at Algrano, I was shocked to know that you're in sales at Algrano because you don't come across as a salesperson. No disrespect to salespeople, but everybody in coffee knows what I'm saying. So welcome. It's a pleasure to finally have you on the podcast, even though it took us a minute to make this happen. And in this series, folks, we're going to be talking about the coffee supply chain and how it's changing in this moment. Now, why did I ask Emma to come on the podcast to talk about this? Well, Emma is somebody who is focused on education. Even the way that she describes her role in sales is education. And it's just such a beautiful way of talking about sales. And so as we explore through this series, how the coffee supply chain is changing in this moment, I thought it would be really interesting to have Emma, who is like right in the middle of all of it. You're a facilitator of relationships, the way that I look at it. And so you speak really thoughtfully around all of that stuff. So supply chain is something that's really difficult for so many people to understand and to get their head around. And I am grateful that you agreed to come and talk about it on the podcast today. So introduce yourself and help people understand what Algrano does, if you don't mind.
Thanks, Lee. So yeah, absolute honor to be here. I'm an avid listener, of course. And in more recent times, I won't lie, I have found myself like, oh my God, yes. to actually hear people talking about the things that I think need to be addressed.
Yeah, wow, thank you.
You know, it has been really refreshing, and I have sent it out to so many people and said, you need to listen to this, you know, you need to hear what people are saying. You should have been listening for a long time, but like
Thank
now more
you.
than ever, please listen. So yeah, really, really nice to be here. And after that crazy meeting in India, which was a phenomenal event, right? And again, I felt
Yeah.
super kind of on asked to go to India and be part of the coffee conference. It was incredible. So yeah, I work as, hilariously, my title is sales manager for the UK and Ireland at Algrano. But as you mentioned, I genuinely do not see myself as a salesperson. I am a salesperson purely in name. And that's it. I think you used a really good word, a word that I'm very fond of as a way of explaining kind of what I do in the industry, but also, you know, the model of Algrano and what Algrano does in the industry, and that is facilitator. So I really do try and, you know, describe, you know, my place and, as I say, the role of Algrano as facilitating. We are service providers. We are not gatekeepers. We are not there to stop people or to hold information back. We are there to support and encourage relationships. And for me, that is something that I think is absolutely critical in the industry. And I actually come into this as, so I've been in coffee for pretty much my entire career. So I've been in hospitality my entire career, right? So I came in quite a traditional route from front of house. I came in from the cafe
Barista?
side.
Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah, barista, but also I've been a trainer for a very, very long time. So I was kind of like, before barista training was even really like a thing, I was somebody that would do front of house and hospitality training. And then coffee making just kind of fell into that.
Right.
So I kind of got more and more into it. I was an avid fan of coffee, but I didn't really at that point know much about it, or, you know, difference between different qualities, or, you know, so I kind of went on my own journey with coffee. And very long story short, but essentially what I ended up doing was eventually becoming an SCA. Well, at that point it was SCAE, AST. I've been through many curricula. But prior to that, I was just doing very generic kind of barista training. And as I say, kind of modeled in with like front of house stuff. I eventually ended up opening my own coffee shops, but they were a bit different because I can never do anything normally. And I ended up, they were training cafes. So I had a big, I saw a space in the market. It was actually through sheer frustration. I was running training programs by that point for lots and lots of different groups. So here in the UK, we have groups known as, well, they're referenced as NEETs, which is not in employment, education, or training. So I would have people that were unemployed and were not in, you know, any formal education. And I would train them with hospitality skills.
Okay.
So along with doing things like front of house and coffee, I would do things like food safety and, you know, menu planning and all different stuff. And then I basically discovered that my guys would be super well trained, making the best coffee, and still couldn't get a job in a high street cafe because they didn't have any work experience.
Right.
And some of these people had come in via routes, so they were maybe like immigration settlement programs. I had young parents, young mums, people that had become, you know, parents at 13, 14 years old and were now looking at getting into careers, jobs. And so I got annoyed with it, decided to open cafes, and, you know, I will give them work experience. I will give them the training.
What a fantastic idea.
And I will go out there. But it was quite early on that I knew that I'm not in coffee for the coffee.
Yeah.
I'm in coffee for the
people. Love it.
For the people. That drove me completely. And for me, the coffee is merely, or at that point was, and still is, I think, was kind of a vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it sounds a little bit cliche that we connected. Coffee was the way that people progressed. Coffee was the way that people got into careers that they loved
Yeah.
and swallowed them up, and they went on these, you know, amazing
Yeah.
journeys. And I think the more I learned about that, the more I looked at the supply chain. So I became an AST, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm training, you know, basically white Europeans about coffee. And there's people that don't have access to this training. And I can't work out why, like what's going wrong. I mean, maybe it's because I speak English and I'm not communicating the right languages, or, you know, what can I do? So I started to look into that, and I was like, well, this isn't accessible. This isn't equitable. And actually, you know, how can somebody from a producing country afford this training? So then I started to look at kind of other ways that we could reach out and connect. And then I started to use my SCA AST license for as much good as I possibly could. So on the side, outside of obviously having to earn a living, I was like, okay, we're going to run some different trainings. I'm going to communicate with different people. And because of that, I grew this network at Origin.
Wow.
And I was
okay.
like, whoa, this is insane. Like, I'm communicating with people, you know, through WhatsApp. I am meeting people I never dreamed I could meet. You know, I don't work in the supply chain. How am I getting to know all this information?
Yeah.
And I just kind of got deeper and deeper and deeper down this rabbit hole. So it was always like my whole journey was education and trying to use education for good, trying to use education for improvement, not me using education. I mean, yeah, I mean, it afforded me a living just about at points.
Just almost.
But almost close.
I hear you.
But yeah, but I loved it, right? It just drove me forward. But then, of course, the more connections I gained in producing countries, the more I saw this massive gap. And I was like, this is not right. This is not fair. This is not spoken about. So I kind of went through this process of feeling frustrated, a bit annoyed. I was like, everybody needs to know this stuff. So I then went down the green coffee route.
Before you go down the green coffee route, do you think that gap, I've never asked anyone this and I don't know why, but do you think that gap that you're talking about was something that was constructed? Do you think it was intentional and deliberate, or do you think that it was just an accident? That's a new thought that I've had.
That is such a brilliant question. I'd like to say it was accidental. I don't believe it is. I don't believe it is one bit. And
Tell me more.
Well, one thing I will say that I swear sits deep in my heart, and again has pushed me forward. I remember it could have been I think it was early lockdown. So I have some incredible friends in Colombia, and they are friends. They are friends. You know, I love them. We connect. We may not see each other very often, but we talk, and, you know, we have this great connection. And one of these people is an incredible woman called Kat from Kat Export. And I remember reaching out to her during lockdown and just being like, Kat, how are you? How are you? Things are tough here. How are things for you in Colombia? You know, I want to hear. I want to know you're okay. Sorry, that's my dog moving around on his bed that he's making that noise. Can I just tell you that his bed is a coffee sack?
Of course it is.
That still has the Grain Pro in it and has some very, very, very old aged coffee. And that's what he sleeps on. And that's why it's so noisy.
Fantastic.
But I brought it home one day. I was using it for green trading, and he just adopted it, and it became his bed.
Love it.
So that's why. It's so noisy when he sells. But yeah, so I remember reaching out to Kat one day, and we're just having this amazing conversation. And she connected me to loads of other producers in Colombia. And I met this young lad called Ronnie. Hi, Ronnie. And Ronnie was from a producing family. And man, what a force. What an incredible guy. he had basically pushed himself to learn everything he could about coffee. So not just growing, which of course he'd grown up in, but roasting, brewing, the sales side of it, everything. And I remember speaking to Ronnie one day and being like, Ronnie, your English is excellent. I apologize. I don't speak Spanish. And he was like, oh, I taught myself English through reading coffee books. And the thing he said to me that really got me was, I remember saying, what do you mean? And he said, well, I had to teach myself English because I wanted to compete. I wanted to learn about brewing. I wanted to learn about espresso. I wanted to learn about roasting. And he looked me in the eye and he said, Emma, if you want to grow the coffee, the books are in Spanish. If you want to enjoy the coffee, the books are in English. And I swear to you, I just went, whoa.
Wow.
Like I'm so privileged. I'm an English woman. I've never come across this. I've never had this issue. And he said, if I wanted to learn to brew the coffee, to roast the coffee, to compete with the coffee, I had to learn to speak English. I had no option. And it hit me deep, right? And that really pushed me onto this, like, whoa, this is not fair. This is, and I just went even kind of deeper into it. So I owe it to Ronnie. Thank you, Ronnie. I owe it to Kat for those connections, and it's through these conversations that I have realized this massive lack of access. And I think historically, if we bring this over to the supply chain in particular, so this has suited people well. We want a disconnect. Why would we want people connected?
Or there are some
Lee,
people
when you're connected, you ask questions and you get answers people don't want you to hear.
Yep.
So in answer to your question, I believe it's on purpose.
I can tell you that there are people around the world that have a massive problem with this podcast. Simply because, and when I say some people, I mean people in governments and big business around the world who have come here to Dubai and have sat with me and had conversations and offered me money to shut this podcast down because they do not like that we connect the dots. And when I say we, I mean the guests and I, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
People do not like the fact that this podcast covers wide-reaching kind of topics and goes 100 layers deep. And they would like us to cut it out. They would like us to stop connecting the dots, which is why we can't have sponsors on the podcast anymore. It's why we can't make money out of this, because the second that we do, they can find a way to stop this podcast from happening. So when you say that you think that there's an intentional agenda, that's my words, not your words, but there seems to be a kind of agenda that is keeping those dots from being drawn, obviously, by keeping information away from people. I get it. Because what I started to realize from doing this podcast and from having conversations with people is the moment coffee brewing and cafes flourishes at origin, we end up, especially in the moment that we're in now, the coffee consuming countries are so super fucked that that's why we're having conversations like this, right? Because as we see Brazil and Colombia and Ethiopia and Rwanda and all of these countries really lean into specialty coffee roasteries and specialty coffee cafes and promoting coffee brewing and competitions happening there, what we're starting to see is producers are saying it is so much easier just to get coffee out into our own local community, and I don't have to deal with the bullshit of exporting coffee and dealing with and that's a dot that I just drew there. It's like, oh, I can clearly see now what they lose from it, because I was always wondering, and it comes back to your favorite word when it comes to everything, which is accessibility.
Yeah.
They lose accessibility. So what has the supply chain traditionally looked like, and how does it traditionally operate, I guess, pre-2023, pre-2024? Because 2024 is when it started shifting.
Yeah. So I think overall that is a big question. And I say it's a big question because it looks very different country to country, even region to region.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important. Like, I teach green coffee courses. It's my favorite topic to teach, as you can probably tell. Like, get me down that rabbit hole. I'm going to drag you all with me. You're going to learn it whether you like it or not.
I love it.
Come on. So, I think we have to, number one, we have to be really mindful that one view is not a global view.
Nice.
And one example is not a global example. Like, I could talk to 5 different producers or exporters from one area, and they would maybe all operate in slightly different ways. You then have the added complexity where different producing countries have different laws and regulations around things like export. And that again adds more complexity. You have different operations in country, which vary again, area or country by country. So I think there's not one view, but I think what we can safely say is that we need to be mindful that the majority of coffee produced globally is collectively produced by smallholders. And most of those smallholders do not have market access.
That's the thing I think people struggle with the most.
Yeah, for sure. I think I talk about this in the green courses and people are like, whoa, what? And I'm like, yeah, collectively, the most coffee grown globally is produced by smallholders. And they don't have this structure, this ability to be able to very often even process their own coffee. So in country, we will have different setups. So you will very often see a producer. You'll then have maybe a cooperative or a globally owned wet mill or dry mill, depending on what how it's sold and how it's processed. You'll have an exporter. You'll have an importer or trader. And then, of course, you'll have the roaster. Now, through that, you also have lots of different jobs and lots of different roles that need to be undertaken. And sometimes the producer will also be the exporter. So they may grow their own coffee, they may process their own coffee, and they may export their own coffee. But that is not the norm. Like, that is not the case most times. And exporters can look really different. You can have small independent exporters. So you can have cooperatives that are, member-led, member-owned, that work really beautifully in country, that do some really amazing work. And they have a lot of involvement from those that are selling their coffee into the cooperative. You can also have other cooperatives that don't have as much member input from everybody that's kind of selling into it, so they can look very different. Cooperatives can act as exporters, and oftentimes they will, but sometimes they don't, and they will need a separate exporter. Exporters can look really different. Exporters can be locally owned, independents, producers. Some of them can be owned by the big multinationals. So then we have this situation where in some parts of the world, you can have a maybe American-owned company that is buying whole cherry, that is processing it, that is exporting it, that is importing it, that is selling it to the roaster. And then you can have other examples where you have a producer that grows their own and, as I say, processes their own and has access to market, and they export it. And some even have their own import licenses. and can sell direct. I mean, it's very, very, very rare by comparison to, the other structures, but it does exist. So I think like the models are really different, and the number of people kind of involved in the supply chain can vary, but oftentimes it's a lot. There's a lot of people that are involved that have to be involved to make the process happen. So I think historically what I've seen is people we have two sides, right? We have, we may have companies who provide some of these services. So who trade coffee, who run washing stations, dry mills, who do the export, who do the import, and who then sell to roasters. And it's useful if it's really complicated, in the sense that why would I want you to understand it? Because ultimately I'm doing this massive, really complex thing in the middle that you as a roaster don't understand. You don't need to understand it. We'll do it for you. And then you have, you have others who are striving to simplify it and say, hey, we know the legal bits in the middle are really complicated, but we can do that for you, but you can still know about them. So, if I can mention, like one of the things that really drew me to that Algrano model is that nothing is made, it's a very complicated issue that is broken down and you give full transparency. And I have experiences with roasters who are like, man, this is incredible. Tell me everything. I want to learn it all. And I have other roasters who say, I'm not interested.
I don't have
Just
time.
Get this from here to here. Just do this. And both is fine, right? Both is fine. But I think having the ability to dig into it, especially now, is like super, super important, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree with you more. And there is that supply chain where everyone in the supply chain that you've talked about is a custodian of the coffee.
Yeah.
But all there is something that I call a shadow supply chain. And it's not talked about enough in our industry. I was recently asked on LinkedIn, this is a multi-billion dollar industry, right?
Yeah.
Somebody's got to be making the money in this industry. Who's making the money? And I said, the people selling the shovels. And for those who don't understand the reference, it's about the gold rush. And whenever there's a gold rush, quote unquote, there's a saying, never be the people who are actually digging for gold, be the people who are selling the shovels. That's the people who make the money. Yeah. In my mind, this shadow supply chain or this shadow kind of shovel seller to the supply chain are the ones who are making the money. And let me be a little bit more transparent about what I'm saying. When we're looking at origin, you've got people who are determining the laws and are determining trade, trade relationships and the boundaries around how trade is allowed to happen. They're lobbying governments. They are lobbying for different relationships to have priority when legislation is being made. They are the people who get contracts for selling fertilizers and they can determine the prices around those fertilizers. And they are the same people who are getting under the table payments for approving these things. They are the people who are signing permits and customs things. This is a whole industry that leeches off the coffee supply chain. And not just the coffee supply chain, the soy supply chain, the broccoli supply chain, the everything supply chain, right? And it is important for us to understand as an industry that there is a shadow industry that's going on. It is the cartels, it is the associations and the federations and the all of that kind of thing where people and CEOs and cartel leaders and whatever are making disgusting amounts of money without ever having to touch the coffee. So
Yep.
it is as important a thing to understand as the actual supply chain, in my opinion. What do you think, Emma?
Yeah, I would agree. I think the issue with it is that a lot of this is not easily accessible for people to understand.
Yeah.
It tends to be, can I call it like hearsay? You may hear about this talking to somebody and you're like, oh my gosh, I never knew this was going on. And where do you find this information to evidence it? How you know about it is because you're told about it by somebody in that country. A producer has explained their situation to you. And, some of the things I've been told over the years have been unbelievable.
Yeah, they
Shocking.
keep you up at
Shocking.
night.
Yeah,
100%.
they really do. They really do. They keep me up at night, they stress me out, and then they push me forwards because I'm like, well, we have to do
Shit
something
needs
to
to get
change
fixed.
this. Yeah, we have to ask questions. Like, I don't get this, I genuinely think, and this is only my opinion, but if you imagine, not just through my role in the industry now, but through my training, I have delivered training to people who are really, really knowledgeable about coffee. And they come into a green coffee course and it's not a gap, it's a void.
It's an ocean. Yeah.
Of knowledge.
100%.
Like, I've taught people that have won international competitions. And then you talk about the supply chain and it's just, there's nothing there. And I don't say that because I'm shaming anybody. Absolutely the opposite. They're in a course to learn. They recognize they have a gap. But it just makes me realize that this is the most important thing, the most important things, and we don't acknowledge them. We don't talk about them. One of the things that used to drive me insane, if I can say, like through lockdown, was honestly the number of people gaining, tens, hundreds of thousands of followers because they're pouring incredible latte art. And I'd be screaming like, guys, like, do you not have any idea about what's going on in El Salvador or Brazil? Have you not seen the news from Ethiopia? Like, how are you not talking about this? And I find this to be, for me, just absolutely mind-blowing. And that is not because I don't respect people that have spent a long time, practicing their latte art, doing incredibly well. That's incredible. But if it weren't for these producers of origin, these cherry pickers, these people involved in the supply chain, these people working at the mills, we would not have a product for you to, even be utilizing. And I used to find it really, I still do find it a little bit frustrating. I've kind of just come to accept that we are just, that is the industry. People love pretty shiny things and they're more focused on the latest brewing technology or the newest brewing gadget or water recipes than they are about the fact that in some producing countries there can be, genocide occurring. And I'm like, how are we so disconnected from this? I just struggle to understand it. And I think, I've always been a really, really, sometimes to a fault, a really empathetic person. And that is what drives me and that is how I am. But I can't believe that we can just ignore all of this shit that goes on in the background and just pretend like it isn't happening.
Especially at a time like this.
It doesn't matter. Exactly. At a time like this, but also, Lee, like, the thing is, now everybody's screaming like, oh, the transition in the market now. What about in 2019?
Yeah.
When
people were committing
we
suicide.
had the price crisis. Nobody gave a crap then. And why didn't they give a crap? Because coffee was cheap. You saw a few people talking about it. The SCA released a white paper about the coffee price crisis, but we didn't see any fundamental change.
No.
We didn't see anything address it.
And that was about the time when we started really like shouting out about the fact, like, listen, there is something that's going to stop this industry dead in its track. And if we don't, like, if we can't pay attention when coffee producers are chopping down their trees and saying, fuck this industry, and coffee producers are committing suicide.
I'd rather burn it than
100%.
harvest it and bother selling it at that
100%.
price. Yeah.
If we can't pay attention when this is happening, some kind of karma is coming for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And anyone who didn't pay attention, not to us, to the producers, when they were telling us back then, you don't deserve this if you can't pay a fair price for it.
Yeah.
And here we are now. So now that we understand this landscape, in the next episode, we're going to talk about what the turning point or the shift in the direction of the coffee supply chain has been. And some people would say, oh, that happened in like that time, 2019. Some people would say it's happening right now. I think it's kind of all of it happening at the same time. So join us for the next episode, folks. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day.
I really hope you enjoyed this episode, friends. Please don't forget to show us some love by subscribing, liking, commenting, and most of all, sharing this podcast with your friends. Check the show notes for links, including our sponsors and our Patreon. And stay tuned for more great conversations on the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward.